So I have a confession to make.
Oh.
When I walk through the produce section in the winter and I see those massive, knobby, intimidating winter squashes, my brain goes to exactly one place.
Let me guess. Soup.
Soup. Every time. Roast it, blitz it, drown it in cream, and call it a day. It's my default setting.
I mean, that is the default setting for probably 90% of home cooks.
Right.
Or, if you're feeling particularly ambitious, maybe a pie. But you're right. We tend to treat pumpkin as just a vehicle for mush.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then I looked at the source material you brought in for today, this chef's guide to something called kabak tatlusi, and it completely flipped the script for me.
It's something else, isn't it?
We aren't making soup.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't making mush. We are making what I can only describe as pumpkin jewels.
Pumpkin jewels is actually a surprisingly accurate description.
Really?
Yeah. We are doing a deep dive into an absolute staple of the Turkish winter table. It's kabak tatlusi, which translates simply to pumpkin dessert. But that simplicity is deceptive.
It sounds like it.
We're talking about taking a dense, fibrous vegetable and using some really interesting kitchen chemistry to turn it into something that glows, holds its shape, and has a texture that's closer to, say, a fruit confit than a cooked vegetable.
And that's the mission today. We are decoding this specific kaymaklı vecevizli.
That means with clotted cream and walnut.
Right, that version of the dish.
Yeah.
We want to understand the why behind the recipe, because looking at the chef's tips in this guide, there are about 5 different ways to completely ruin this.
Oh, absolutely. It's a high wire act. You can end up with pumpkin mash, which is, basically baby food.
Not what we want.
Or you can end up with burnt, bitter rocks if you mess up the sugar work. The goal is this perfect middle ground. Tender, translucent, but with a structural integrity that sort of snaps when you bite it.
Okay, so let's get into the lab. We start with the raw material. The source calls for 1 kilogram of bal kabaro. Now, be honest with me. Is this just any old jack-o'-lantern pumpkin I grab off a porch?
Please, for the love of culinary science, do not eat the porch pumpkin.
Got it.
Those are grown for size and durability, not for flavor. They are watery, stringy, and just bland. Bal kabayu literally translates to honey pumpkin. You want a dense, sweet winter squash.
So if I'm in the U.S. or Europe and I can't find a specifically Turkish pumpkin, what am I looking for? What's the substitute?
You're looking for high starch density, so
Yeah.
think along the lines of a Hubbard squash, a Hokkaido, or even a really good, heavy butternut squash. You need a pumpkin that fights back a little when you cut it.
Okay.
If it feels like slicing through a watermelon, it's just too watery.
Okay, so we have our dense, heavy pumpkin. The first step in the guide is prep. Peel, remove seeds. Pretty standard stuff. But then we hit our first, really specific variable, the cut.
Yes.
The recipe demands slices exactly 2 to 3 fingers wide, or roughly 2 centimeters thick.
Right, and this isn't just a chef being fussy about presentation. This is all about thermodynamics.
I was going to say, I usually just hack vegetables into chunks. Why does 2 centimeters matter so much? Why not slice them thin to cook faster?
Okay, so think about surface area versus volume. If you slice it too thin, say 1 centimeter, the sugar syrup we're going to make will just penetrate all the way through instantly.
And the structure collapses.
The structure collapses and you get jam.
Which we do not want.
We do not want jam. But if you go too thick, like a big 5 centimeter chunk, the heat won't get to the center before the outside starts to fall apart. You'll have this candied exterior and a raw, starchy interior.
The 2 centimeters is the Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. It's the Goldilocks zone. It allows the heat and the sugar to migrate to the center at pretty much the exact same rate that the structure softens.
It's an engineering decision then. Uniformity is key.
100%.
All right, we've got our 2 centimeter slabs of pumpkin. Now this is where the recipe really threw me. If I'm cooking a vegetable, I'm reaching for the water tap. I'm thinking boiling, steaming.
Right.
But this guide says stop, put the water down.
This is the most critical technique in the entire recipe. It's what I call the sugar soak.
A sugar soak?
The guide calls for pouring 2 cups of granulated sugar directly over the raw pumpkin slices right there in the pot. And then you do nothing.
You just let it sit, like dry sugar on raw pumpkin.
You wait. The text says to mix it and let it sit until the sugar creates a syrup. Ideally, you'd leave it for 3 to 4 hours or even overnight.
But there's no liquid in the pot yet. How does dry sugar create a syrup?
This is pure osmosis in action. It's the same principle as, say, salting an eggplant or macerating strawberries. The sugar concentration on the outside of the pumpkin cells is incredibly high,
Okay.
and nature hates an imbalance. So to equalize that pressure, the water inside the pumpkin cells rushes out to meet the sugar.
So we are literally using physics to extract the pumpkin's own juice.
Exactly. And this does two things that are just crucial for the final result. First, flavor. We aren't diluting the pumpkin flavor with tap water. The cooking liquid is pure, concentrated pumpkin essence.
Ah, which explains why it tastes so rich.
It does, but the second reason is texture. By drawing water out of the cells before we even apply heat, we are actually toughening up the cell walls a little bit. We're sort of curing the pumpkin.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you just threw raw pumpkin into boiling water, the cells would burst and it would get mushy. By doing the sugar soak first, we firm up the structure so it can survive the cooking process.
That is fascinating. It's basically a marinade, but it's a marinade for texture.
That's a great way to put it.
So you come back to the pot after a few hours, and what do you see?
You'll see the pumpkins swimming in a pool of liquid. The sugar will be mostly dissolved. That is your cooking medium.
And only then does the recipe say to add 1 cup of water.
And that water is just an insurance policy. It's there to provide enough steam to get the cooking started before the pumpkin releases the rest of its juice. But the main liquid is coming from the vegetable itself.
Okay, the pot is prepped. We have our pumpkin, our sugar, our natural juices.
Yeah.
But before we turn on the stove, there's a secret ingredient listed. And frankly, it seemed out of place to me. 2 tablespoons of lemon juice.
Ah, yes. The acid.
Why? I mean, it's a dessert. We have pumpkin and sugar. Why are we introducing acid? Is it just for flavor balance?
At this quantity, 2 tablespoons for a whole kilo of pumpkin, you won't really taste sourness. It won't taste like a lemon dessert.
So what's it doing?
The source explicitly states this is for vivid color and for the consistency.
Color. How does lemon juice affect the color of a pumpkin?
Well, think about an apple or an avocado. You cut it, you leave it on the counter, and what happens?
It turns brown. Oxidation.
Exactly. Pumpkin does the same thing, especially when cooked for a long time. It can turn this sort of muddy, dull brown. The citric acid acts as an antioxidant. It preserves that bright neon orange carotene color.
So it's cosmetic.
But it's also chemical. Acid interferes with the breakdown of pectin. Pectin is the glue that holds plant cells together. By adding a little acid, we're basically reinforcing that glue. It helps the pumpkin hold its shape even when it gets soft.
And what about the sugar? Does it affect the sugar?
Great catch.
Yeah.
Yes, it prevents crystallization. We are making a very heavy syrup here. Without a little acid to invert the sugar, you might end up with a grainy, crunchy texture as it cools. The lemon juice keeps that syrup smooth and velvety.
It's amazing how much work 2 tablespoons of lemon juice are doing.
It really is.
It's the color guard, the structural engineer, and the texture controller all in one.
It's the unsung hero of the dish. You literally cannot skip it.
So the recipe also mentions throwing in some aromatics here, vanilla or a cinnamon stick. Standard stuff. But let's talk about the cooking. The guide has a very strict rule. Lid closed
Non-negotiable.
and low heat.
Huh.
For 40 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm the kind of cook who likes to crank the heat to get things done. I want dessert now. Why can't I just boil this?
Because violence is the enemy of texture.
Violence is the enemy of texture. That needs to be on a t-shirt.
It's true. If you boil water vigorously, you create all this turbulence. Bubbles are thrashing around. If you do that to pumpkin slices that are softening,
They just break apart.
the mechanical action of the water will just break them apart. You'll make mash.
Sure.
By keeping the heat low and the lid on, we are essentially poaching or steaming the pumpkin. The environment inside that pot is gentle. The steam circulates, thanks to the lid, and it cooks the pumpkin through without agitating it. It's a spa treatment, not a wrestling match.
Okay, so we've waited 45 minutes.
Yeah.
The pumpkin is soft. The house smells amazing. Now we enter what I'm calling the danger zone. The recipe says, take the lid off.
This is the reduction phase.
What?
Up until now, we've been cooking the vegetable. Now we need to cook the syrup.
Right.
We have too much liquid because of that osmosis we talked about. We need to drive that water off and caramelize the sugars.
The text mentions a visual cue here. It says the pumpkin's color should start darkening.
That's the Maillard reaction kicking in. The sugars are concentrating and starting to brown. You want the pumpkin to go from a bright matte orange to a glossy deep amber. It should really look like it's glowing.
But there is a very specific warning in the chef's tips about the syrup consistency. It says, the syrup must be fluid, but not too thick. And then it says, If boiled too long, it turns bitter.
This is where you have to pay attention. You can't walk away to check your email. As water evaporates, the temperature of that sugar syrup rises.
And if it gets too hot?
It burns, it turns acrid. And once sugar burns, you can't fix it. The whole pot is ruined.
So what are we looking for? How do I know when to kill the heat?
You're looking for the viscosity of, say, warm honey. It should coat the back of a spoon. And you have to remember, syrup thickens a lot as it cools.
And so if it looks thick in the pot while it's boiling hot.
It's going to turn into hard candy when it hits room temperature. You want it to seem slightly too runny when you turn off the stove.
That is such a counterintuitive tip. You have to trust that it's going to set up.
Exactly. The guide suggests this reduction phase should only be about 10 minutes. That's your window.
Okay, we've navigated the chemistry. We have these glossy amber pumpkin slices. They look incredible. Now, naturally, I want to eat them immediately.
Of course.
But even here, the guide has opinions. It says you can eat it hot, but chilled is better.
And this touches on how we perceive flavor.
Go on.
Extreme heat masks nuance.
No.
If you eat something piping hot, your tongue is mostly just registering pain and temperature. You miss the subtle notes of the vanilla, the lemon, the pumpkin itself.
It's like drinking cheap coffee hot versus cold. You taste all the flaws when it cools down.
Precisely. But here, you taste the quality. Cooling it down allows the syrup to set into that beautiful gel-like consistency, and all the flavors marry together. Plus, there's a very practical reason for cooling it.
A topping.
The topping. We cannot forget the title of the dish. Kaymaklave çevisli.
Kaymak. I feel like this word is spoken with a certain reverence. For the uninitiated, what exactly is kaymak?
It is glorious. It's a Turkish clotted cream, usually made from water buffalo milk. It is incredibly thick, dense, rich.
Okay.
It has a fat content closer to butter than heavy cream, roughly 60%. And it's not sweet like whipped cream. It has this pure, milky, fatty flavor.
If you put that on a piping hot piece of pumpkin.
It melts instantly into a puddle of oil. You lose that amazing texture. You want the pumpkin cool enough that the kaymak sits proudly on top.
It's about the contrast, isn't it?
It's the perfect bite. You have the intense, sugary sweetness of the pumpkin. Then you have this cool, fatty, unsweetened cream that cuts right through that sugar. It just resets your palate.
The recipe suggests a ratio of 1 teaspoon of kaymak per portion, which honestly sounds a bit stingy to me. I'm more of a tablespoon kind of guy.
The guide is being polite, but be careful. Kaymak is very, very rich. If you use too much, it just coats your tongue and you lose the pumpkin flavor. It's all about balance.
Now, here is a real problem for our listeners.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a Turkish dairy shop down the street. Real water buffalo kaymak is hard to find in the U.S. or the U.K.
Very hard to find.
Does the guide offer any lifelines?
It does, and I thought this was a brilliant suggestion. It suggests condensed milk cream, or surprisingly, labne cheese.
Labne. That's a strained yogurt cheese. That seems sour.
But think about it. Labne has that thick, spreadable texture, which is similar to kaymak.
True.
And that slight tang. It actually works in your favor against the heavy syrup. It's not traditional, but from a flavor chemistry standpoint, it's a very smart substitution.
So if you can't find clotted cream, don't just use, ready whip. Go for something with substance like labne or maybe a very thick mascarpone.
Exactly. You need the fat and the density. You need something that can stand up to the pumpkin.
And then the final element, the walnuts. 1 cup of crushed walnuts.
This brings the crunch. But did you notice the chef's puf noktaza? The tip regarding when to add the walnuts?
I did. It felt like a choose-your-own-adventure moment.
It really is, the guide says. If you want the walnuts to be soft and integrated, you cook them with the pumpkin. They'll soak up the syrup and become tender, almost like the walnuts in a carrot cake.
Okay.
But if you want that contrast, which I think this dish really needs, you sprinkle them on after cooking, right before you serve it.
I am definitely team crunch. You've got soft pumpkin, creamy kaymak. You need that snap.
I agree. It adds an auditory element to the whole eating experience. The crunch just breaks up the monotony of the soft textures.
So we've covered the classic execution.
Yeah.
But the guide also lists some advanced moves. It mentions adjusting flavors. Cinnamon is standard, but then it throws out some wild cards. Cardamom or orange zest.
This is where we see the recipe bridging the gap between, traditional village cooking and modern gastronomy.
Orange zest feels like such a natural fit.
It is. Pumpkin is an earthy flavor. It can be a bit heavy. Citrus oils, especially orange, lift that heaviness.
Yeah.
It adds a top note that makes the whole dish feel lighter and more aromatic.
It brightens it up.
Exactly. It brightens the dark caramelized sugar flavors.
And cardamom. That feels very exotic for a Turkish dessert.
Cardamom is fascinating. It has that floral eucalyptus, almost menthol quality. It cuts through sugar very effectively. If you use cardamom, you're suddenly pivoting the dish towards more of an Indian or Middle Eastern profile. It's very sophisticated. It makes the pumpkin taste less like a vegetable and more like a complex confection.
I love that idea of customizing the perfume of the dish.
And don't forget the sugar adjustment. The guide explicitly says the 2 cups is a baseline. You have to taste your pumpkin.
Right, because it's a plant. It varies.
Exactly. If you get a super sweet squash and you use the full 2 cups of sugar, it might be cloying. You have to use your judgment. That's what separates a cook from a robot.
So let's zoom out for a second. We've unpacked the osmosis of the sugar soak, the structural engineering of the lemon juice, the physics of the lid-closed cooking. What is the big picture here? Why is this specific method considered the richest and most delicious?
I think it comes down to respect for the ingredient. This method doesn't try to hide the pumpkin. It's not burying it in a pie crust or drowning it in pumpkin spice latte flavoring.
That's confident.
It is. It says this is a pumpkin and it is delicious. By using its own juice to make the syrup, by preserving its color, by cooking it so gently that it doesn't turn to mush, you are elevating the humble squash into something truly elegant.
It really is a transformation. You start with this hard, bland vegetable, and you end up with translucent, glowing jewels.
And the pairing with kemak or labneh is just a masterclass in balancing the 3 pillars of dessert: sweet, fat, and texture.
You know, reading through this guide, one thing stood out to me more than the chemistry.
What's that?
It's the waiting. You wait for the sugar to draw out the water. You wait 45 minutes on low heat. You wait for it to cool down.
That's a really profound observation. We live in a world of 30-minute meals and Instant Pots. We want everything now.
But this recipe refuses to be rushed.
It suggests that flavor isn't just about ingredients, it's about the relationship between those ingredients and time. The resting phase is just as active, chemically speaking, as the cooking phase.
Right.
That sugar soak, that's active work, even if you aren't doing anything.
That's something I want you, the listener, to think about. Why do we always view cooking as something we have to do with our hands? We stir, we chop, we sauté. But this recipe proves that resting and cooling are actually culinary techniques.
Sometimes the best thing you can do for a dish is to just step back and let the physics take over.
So next time you see a Tuscan pumpkin at the market, don't just walk past it. Grab some sugar, grab a lemon, don't forget the lemon, and maybe practice a little patience. You might just end up with the best dessert of the winter. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of kabak tatlısı.
Enjoy the cooking.
We'll see you next time.